Hi, it's Lara back with your weekly astrology forecast. This one's for the week of February 26th to March 4th. No, March 3rd, 2020. So January felt like the month that time stood still, right? It was just seemed like it was taking forever. And then we hit February and it was like, phew, it's felt like a freight train. That's how it's felt for me anyway. And we are already on the verge of entering March, where things are not likely to slow down. But right now, we're at this space where, even though we just had the new moon in Pisces, right? And new moons are associated with new beginnings, planting new seeds, that kind of thing. It feels, at least for me, and that's partly because of my own personal astrology, but it feels like a winding down in many ways more than a new beginning. And I think that's fairly typical, for Pisces season, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, because we are at the end of winter. Pisces is a mutable sign. Pisces is one of those signs that marks the transition between seasons. And so, here we are in this kind of limbo right now between winter and spring. And when the sun moves into Aries, and, if you're more of a lunar person and you follow the lunar calendar more, when we have that new moon in Aries, right around the time of the solstice, that is sort of more the astrological new year, right? Where spring arrives in the north and the cycle begins again. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. I heard something, this is a bit of a side note, recently talking about how the ancient Sumerians actually celebrated the new year with the right after the new moon in Pisces, when the moon was first visible, right? The crescent moon, when you could actually see that first sliver of moon in the sky. And it was the new moon closest to the point right before the sun entered Aries. And so I was listening to this astrologer who is, I think, Bulgarian. I cannot remember exactly. Her first name's Krasi. I can't remember her last name. I would have to look it up. So apologies, but props to her because I was listening to this. And she knows a lot about that, the ancient astrology. And so that was kind of interesting. But I was thinking about it. And for me, I really do feel more of a sense that that newness begins around either when the sun, the solstice point, when the sun enters Aries, or when we have that new moon right around then. And I am a Pisces sun, so it is, and my birthday hasn't come yet. It's on the 7th. And so that's sort of my own personal rebirth, right? And so at this time of year, I kind of feel like low energy. I'm exhausted right now. Frankly, not feeling myself, not feeling 100%, and hoping for a bit of a boost when I hit my solar return. So, but just in general, we are, as I was saying, we are at that point in the year when we're in this kind of liminal space, right? Pisces is that unseen world. It is that place between death and rebirth, really. In a sense, it's like, where we are before the cycle begins again. And so it can have that feeling, to it in general. Like we're feeling, I think, collectively a sense at this time of what's going to happen next. What's next? But Pisces wants us to have faith in the process, to trust the grand scheme of things, to trust the universe, right? Or our higher power, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to language that, to trust the process. And that's not always easy. But it's really what we are called to do at this time of transition. And having said that, all the while still doing what we can and taking what actions we can. Mars is in Capricorn right now, where it likes to be, and it will eventually, as I mentioned in past videos, be, pinging all those planets in Capricorn and charging them up. But it can feel like that can feel like a bit of a kind of a bumpy kind of journey. But so we have to do what we can, but we don't necessarily have all the information, all the answers. Mercury's in retrograde right now, digging up some information, asking us to go inward and retrieve the answers, right? And to just kind of hold off a bit and see what information comes in right now. On the topic of Mercury, Mercury is conjuncting the sun these few days. And so we call that Kazemi, meaning Mercury is being blocked out kind of by the brightness of the sun right now. The sun is holding counsel with Mercury right now. And so we can feel, that can feel a bit intense, particularly mentally, with our thought processes, with communications, these kinds of things. And we have to just ride that out. And Mercury will begin, parting from the sun with its newfound wisdom over these next couple of days. Before I talk more about Mercury, before I show you the chart, I want to mention, obviously, we've had the new moon in Pisces. That's what last week's video was about. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, then it's still relevant, right? We're just at that crescent moon phase where we can just see the first signs of the new moon in the sky. And that is when our seeds of intention that we plant at the new moon start to, solidify a little, start to get some substance to them. And but the moon has now, as I'm recording this, moved out of Pisces and it's moved into Aries, cardinal fire energy, right, of Aries. And again, if you want to know what a moon in Aries is good for, or how that's relevant to you in some way, and how that's the moon cycles in general are relevant to us, and how we can use the energy of the moon to guide us through our month, through our days, then please do go download my free guide to working with the moon that's over on my website, and the link to that is below. But the moon is in Aries as I'm recording this, and then it will move into Taurus on Friday in time for the weekend. So, Taurus moon, I always enjoy a Taurus moon. The moon likes to be in Taurus. She's very comfortable there and cozy. And it can be a moon in Taurus can be a great time for, bringing some comfort and some pleasure into your experience, maybe cooking a good meal and just getting cozy under the covers and beside the fire and having a bit of a relax kind of thing. And then we've got the moon moving into Gemini on Sunday. So the early part of the week, Sunday, Monday, early part of Tuesday, will be quite active, usually under a Gemini moon. Lots of mental activity, mental stimulation, communications, this kind of thing, information, gathering and sharing, that sort of thing tends to happen under a Gemini moon. And then she will move into her home sign of Cancer on Tuesday. So I was talking about the Mercury retrograde, right? And Mercury conjuncting the sun. And I was going to mention to you that we've got Mercury retrograde in Pisces. I spoke about this in the last couple of videos, but I don't know if you're noticing this on the collective or in your own personal experience, but it's like Mercury in the depths of Pisces, right? It's like a giant ocean being stirred up, and all the information and the secrets that we, may have been hiding in plain sight even, or sitting, on the ocean floor covered in moss kind of thing. They are, the ocean's being stirred up, and that stuff is coming into our awareness. And that's happening on a collective level very much. We can see just one example of that, all that's going on right now in terms of the Harvey Weinstein case and all the people that are being implicated in that, and what's happening with that. That's just one example. And I think we will continue to kind of see that being stirred up over the course of this Mercury retrograde. And no doubt there is some information gathering that's probably going on behind the scenes that we may not be aware of right now as well. So that's going on. I also want to say in relation to the Mercury retrograde, there's not very much air in the chart right now. Not a lot going on in the air signs. The moon will move into Gemini, an air sign, as I mentioned, early part of next week, and kind of highlight that a bit for us. But in general, not a lot of air going on. And so it's like our communications may be a little bit stunted right now, or kind of more under the surface, or more internal. We may have some trouble kind of vocalizing or articulating things. And just communications may be more, not on a necessarily on a, sort of a verbal plane. It's the communications may be kind of underground or under the surface, or more unspoken at this time, with little air in the chart. So I wanted to mention that too. I'm going to show you the chart before I launch into the next piece here, which is what I'm really going to focus on for this video, because I haven't revealed that to you just yet. But here we go. Here's the chart for today. And we can see that we have this, which seems like the never-ending story in Capricorn, with all of the energy in Capricorn. We've got Saturn, which incidentally, just let me pull this away from my face for a second. Saturn is going to make its first entrance into Aquarius in the next few weeks. So we will get a bit of a taste of what that will be about for each of us. But I'll speak about that in a future video, because we're not quite there yet, because Saturn is still there in Capricorn. We've got Chiron there, holding space for us. Pluto, Jupiter, Asteroid Pallas, Athena, and Mars, and of course the South Node, all in Capricorn. We have Mercury retrograde in Pisces, very close to the sun there, as I mentioned. Of course, Neptune's still there for the long haul. Uranus in Taurus. There's Vesta in Taurus too. Juno is over here. Asteroid Juno is over here in Libra. I'm going to bring her into the conversation. There's Ceres in Aquarius, right? But then we have a lot of energy in Aries here as well, in another cardinal sign, which is squaring the energy in Capricorn, right? And here we have Lilith, still conjunct Chiron. The moon is currently in Aries as I'm recording this. She will move on quickly, right? She changes signs rapidly. There's Venus in, Aries, a sign she's not super comfortable in. She's having a rough go, Venus, and we're going to talk more about her. And she is squaring Pluto this week. And that's a bit intense too. Not only is she squaring Pluto, but she is conjuncting Eris as well, a very powerful feminine energy. And on that note, that's really what I want to focus on here is, I drew your attention to this square between Aries and Capricorn. And what's really, in my experience, and when I was looking at the chart and considering what to talk about this week, what really is sticking out to me, aside from, the Mercury kind of retrograde piece, is and the Pisces energy, right, which I spoke about already, but is this real hit to the feminine that's going on right now. There is a lot going on with feminine energy these days, the feminine energy in the chart, right? And one of the things I want to remind you of, and that I've spoken about before, is that we've got all this stuff going on in Capricorn. Capricorn's a feminine sign. We often lose sight of that because, it's about the establishment and the structures and the rules and the hierarchy and, what's kind of solid and of substance, and all of these things, the responsibility and the maturity and achievement and mastery and all these things. But in a feminine sense, Capricorn is a feminine sign. And so we have a lot of energy there right now. And then we have a lot of feminine energy in the more masculine sign of Aries, the warrior, right? So I mentioned to you, we've got Lilith there. I spoke about this in a couple videos ago. Lilith conjuncting Chiron, stirring up some deep need, for healing the wounds, the deep wounding of the feminine. And we have Eris there for the long haul, right? Another face of the feminine. Again, a sort of the woman scorned. Like Eris and Lilith are similar. I spoke about this before. Eris speaks more to the collective experience of the feminine, and Lilith more in our individual experience. But they're similar energies, of the feminine, the wounded feminine, and the feminine that feels some rage for what she's gone through and this kind of thing and what she's going through. And then we have Venus, also feminine energy, speaking more to our kind of immediate day-to-day experience, being a personal planet, Venus. And she is getting, bashed around in Aries as well right now. And so there's a lot going on with the feminine. Lilith conjuncting Chiron is soon going to be squaring the nodes of the moon in Cancer and Capricorn. I'll just kind of show you that on the chart again because I didn't point that out. There's the chart. So, Lilith and Chiron there's the nodes. North node in Cancer, south node in Capricorn, right? 6 degrees, and this is at 3 degrees. So considered in a square, but will because the nodes move always in retrograde motion, always backwards. So they're backing out of Cancer and going to enter Gemini, which will be a significant shift. But squaring the nodes, and so and the nodes, just to remind you, right, the nodal axis, the north and south node are always across from the sky, from each other. That's how they travel. And so if you look at your birth chart, you will see that your north node and your south node are exactly opposite each other. And the nodes speak to our soul's path, right? It's where we have been and where we are going. It's what we are well experienced in, the good, the bad, and the ugly, versus the unknown. It is our past and our future. It's, the North Node speaks to what we are being called to embrace in this lifetime. And the South Node speaks to what we are being asked to release and let go of and purge, and not necessarily like cut off the tail, but of the dragon, because in Vedic astrology, the south node is the tail of the dragon, the north node is the head, right? So not to cut off the tail, those experiences have been valuable to us, but to gather that learning and move on from it, right? Is the way that I like to think about it. But my point is that this Lilith Chiron energy is going to square the nodes, and that represents a kind of karmic turning point, a kind of in evolutionary astrology, a planet that squares the nodes is called a skipped step, and it's something that can trip us up on the way to our destiny, our soul, on our soul's path. And so particularly if we're not aligned with our soul's path. And so this can be, with the collective north nodes currently, or collective nodes currently in Cancer and Capricorn, this can speak to our collective experience, a tripping up on our, collective destiny kind of thing. Or if you have your north node in Cancer or Capricorn, then this may apply to you more personally. Or if you have any planets in the early degrees of the cardinal signs as well, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So it may speak to you more personally here, this square to the nodes. But no doubt, we're all feeling it. I think the feminine energy is feeling it most profoundly. And on that note, we have also, as I pointed in the chart, Venus conjuncting Eris in Aries and squaring Pluto this week. So, I mentioned Venus is being challenged in a really big way right now. And we can feel this. She's feeling vulnerable. She's feeling frustrated and angry and fed up and perhaps exposed and primed for transformation. We also have another feminine energy, Juno, who is the asteroid of partnership, the relationship asteroid kind of thing. And she is opposing Venus and Eris right now because she's in Libra. She's retrograde in Libra. So just this real kind of tension going on with the feminine. The good news is that Venus is moving into Taurus on March 4th. So next Thursday. And she's at home in Taurus, right? Venus rules Taurus. She loves to be there. So she will get a bit of a reprieve when she moves into Taurus. But we still have those other feminine elements at play as well. But in our own maybe core personal kind of day-to-day experience, we may have a bit of an easing up there. Of course, depending on what's going on in your own personal chart, right? I cannot know that unless I look at your chart specifically, which I'm happy to do, right? You can always get a reading if you're interested. The link to my website is below. But as Venus moves into Taurus, she will, at the early degrees of Taurus, she will conjunct Uranus there, right? Who's at 3 degrees. And so she can be in for a bit of a surprise when that happens, or ideally maybe have a chance to liberate herself in some way, or be fired up about rebellion, right? Uranus is a rebellion energy. But in Taurus, overall, she will feel more at home, more secure, have a chance to be revived and comforted a bit. So that's good. But before then, Venusian themes in our lives, right, can feel quite challenging. And what do I mean by Venusian themes? Well, our relationships, right? Our close personal relationships. Issues around beauty and aesthetic. Issues around our material resources, money. Around our values, what we value, what we hold close to our heart. And issues around pleasure, right? The 5 senses. Taurus is the sign of the 5 senses, what we experience through our 5 senses. And so, and we tend to experience pleasure through our senses. And so Venus is connected to that energy. So all of those things can feel a bit challenging around this time. And this tension will be felt probably most prominently by people who have planets or points around that 23, 24 degrees of the cardinal signs, give or take a few degrees on either side. And again, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. I just so happen, side note, personal note, to have a conjunction between Venus and Saturn in my birth chart at 23 and 24 degrees of Aries. So, bazinga, I'm getting hit with this right now. And really feeling it on all of those levels that I mentioned. All those Venusian themes are being hit for me. So, this can also be felt quite prominently by people who are ruled by Venus. So Libra and Taurus people. Sun, moon, or rising. And I would also say by women or by people who identify really as more feminine in general can really be feeling this. the masculine energy, the sort of toxic masculine, is getting its comeuppance in a way right now too, but it is the feminine that's really where the wounds are exposed, right now. So what I will say to you before I move through each of the signs and speak to this energy, right? I'm going to speak to the houses that Aries and Capricorn are sitting in for each of us, and where we may feel this tension kind of coming from, and this need to resolve that tension. And how do we resolve that tension, right? Remember, a square is a conversation of tension. It's a 90-degree angle where something's got to give. The energy needs to be released and resolved in some way, and we can do that in healthy, empowering ways, or in more sort of self-destructive, ways. And it can be like an imploding almost of the energy. So how do we resolve it in a more healthy manner? Well, we act in self-empowering, self-loving, self-respecting, that's a big one, ways, right, to relieve this tension. And that will look differently for each of us. But I would say that those are really key things to keep top of mind. What feels like self-respect, to me? What feels self-loving? What feels self-empowering? And sometimes we get this idea that me stomping all over another person is going to feel really good, and that's me respecting myself. Ultimately, that's not usually the case. Again, sometimes people need their comeuppance. Sometimes things have to get ugly in order to be resolved, to be cleaned up, that sort of thing. But if we can resolve the tension without going there, we're always going to feel better about it in the end, right? And so that's what I would advise. And I need to take my own advice here. Full disclosure, this has been challenging energy for me. But the houses that contain Aries and Capricorn are the areas of life that this pressure will be most evident in for us. And so let's go there now, right? Let's go through each of the signs, and I will speak to where this tension is kind of brewing for you specifically, based first and foremost on rising sign, because in these general forecasts, that tends to be what kind of is most evident, right? And most accurate. But also listen for your moon sign and your sun sign. People, women in general, or people who identify as more feminine, tend to resonate with the energies of the moon, more so. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Oftentimes, the moon speaks to our emotions. It's kind of the internal life. So when you're listening for your moon sign, it can give you a flavor of that, right? And then again, your ascendant or rising sign, and also your sun sign, right, will give you added information in these general forecasts. So let's begin with Aries, because Aries, you've got Venus traveling through your sign right now, meeting up with Eris. You've also got Lilith and Chiron there conjuncting each other, right? Big stuff going on in Aries. And this is squaring your 10th house, which is where all this stuff in Capricorn is happening, right? And where Venus is squaring Pluto this week specifically. So the 1st and the 10th, the first house, the house of the self, I, me, mine. It's your house, Aries, right? Aries is at home in the first house. It is the physical body and the physical vitality, and it is the instinctual approach to the world, how you present yourself out in the world, how you respond to external stimuli. And then the 10th house is it's very visible, right? It's who you are out in the world, your public reputation and persona, your worldly ambitions, your career, the legacy you wish to leave, your authority or relationship to authority and authority figures, and to the hierarchy and all of that. And so these two areas, right, are in tension with this energy. And so how are you going to resolve that, right? How are you going to resolve the tension between those two things? Well, again, acting in self-respecting, self-loving, self-empowering ways is my advice to you. And I'd be curious to know if if you're willing to share, if you see this playing out, this energy playing out for you, and what that looks like. We can learn from each other by sharing our experiences. And so I'd be curious to know. But it's the 1st and 10th house, where this tension is for you, Aries. Moving on to Taurus, the tension is brewing between your 12th and your 9th houses, Taurus. So Venus and Eris together in Aries, and then or at the earlier degrees of Aries, we've got Lilith conjuncting Chiron, and then we have this energy squaring off in Capricorn, and specifically Venus and Aries squaring Pluto in Capricorn, right? This week. And so these 2 areas of the chart, or your areas of your life, are in tension. So what are those? Well, the 12th house is all things unseen. So it's our relationship to spirituality, our spiritual world. It is what we do behind closed doors. It is, including our habits and our potential addictions and these kinds of things. It is how we spend time in solitude and reflection and rest and recovery and recuperation and prayer and dreaming and all of this. It can literally have to do with places behind closed doors, hospitals, hospices, prisons, detention facilities, rehabilitation facilities, these kinds of things. It can have to do with losses as well, right? The 12th house is the house of letting go. It's the last house on the journey of the zodiac. And then the 9th house, which is this energy is in tension with, in square with, has to do with our philosophies and our belief systems, and your worldview, what you learn from people and places that are different from you. Foreign cultures and people are associated with the 9th house, as are, far-reaching sort of concepts and places, and, so higher learning, and long-distance travel. All of these things are in the 9th house. And so those 2 areas, 12th and 9th, are squaring off. Seek to resolve whatever tension is brewing there in a way that feels good, that feels in integrity, that feels aligned with your soul's path, that feels self-empowering and self-respecting. And only you will know, right, what that means for you. So that's you, Taurus. Moving on to Gemini, the 2 areas that are in tension for you, Gemini, are the 11th and the 8th houses. So Venus and Eris, Lilith and Chiron sitting in Aries in your 11th house. And then we've got all the energy in Capricorn, right? Including Pluto there squaring off with Venus this week. So 11th house speaks to, it's sometimes known as the house of gains, right? It speaks to our hopes and dreams for the future, the people that are walking the same path as us, that can help us, get to where we want to be, reach for our highest ambitions. And it is the house of groups and friendships, associations, clubs, networks, including kind of internet and in this day and age, internet contacts and that kind of thing as well, how we spread our message that way. And then that is in tension with the 8th house, which is the house of regeneration. I was doing a little bit of reading earlier today, and Dane Rudhyar, an astrologer who I have a great deal of respect for, he said a lot of things, but just in a nutshell, the 8th house is the house of the substance of our relationships. And so, I often refer to it as the place where we feel vulnerable. 8th house themes are kind of themes that, where we can feel vulnerable, because it's our intimate connections. It's our shared resources. It's our psychological wounding. It's our secrets and the unseen, right? The occult, secret knowledge, that sort of thing, is all the stuff that brews in the 8th house. And so these things, these themes of 8th house are squaring off with those 11th house themes that I spoke about. And to resolve that tension, we need to act and do something about it, right? Take action. But the action should feel aligned, in integrity, self-respecting, self-loving, all of that. So that's for you, Gemini. And moving on to Cancer, we've got the 10th and the 7th houses squaring off. So we've got Venus, Eris, Chiron, Lilith sitting in Aries in your 10th house, and then Pluto and all the other planets in Capricorn, and Pluto and Venus are squaring off this week. So, and Capricorn is your 7th house. So 10th and the 7th are squaring off. This is where the tension is brewing for you. The 10th house, the public persona, your status out in the world, your career, your worldly ambitions, your relationship to authority and authority figures, the legacy you wish to leave, father figures, this sort of thing, squaring off with the 7th house of one-to-one relationships, of close personal relationships, of contractual obligations and agreements, this kind of thing. These energies are in tension. And so how do you resolve this tension? You take some action, and that action should feel self-empowering and self-respecting and self-loving and in integrity. So that's what's going on for you, Cancer. Of course, listen to the introduction for all of the tidbits, right? And for context, moving on to Leo, we've got the 9th and the 6th houses squaring off for you. So Venus and Eris and Lilith and Chiron are in Aries in your 9th. And then we've got Pluto and all the other planets in Capricorn squaring off here. And Pluto and Venus are squaring off specifically this week. So for you, Leo, that feels like tension between your tension between your world view, your philosophy, your belief system, your perhaps some arena of higher learning, foreign people and places, and long distance travel potentially. And then your daily grind, the 6th house, right? What you do on the day-to-day, checking off the day-to-day ticky boxes, your routines around health and wellness, and relationships between unequals factors in here to the 6th house. Pets as well, right? Factors into the 6th house. So, something going on in those two areas of life is in tension. And how you resolve that tension is acting in self-respecting, self-loving ways, taking actions that are in integrity and aligned, feel aligned to you, aligned with your soul's, your soul's intentions and your soul's path. So that's what's going on for you, Leo. Moving on to Virgo, where we have the 8th and the 5th houses in tension for you this week. So Venus, Eris, Lilith and Chiron in Aries, squaring off with the Capricorn energy, including Pluto. They're squaring Venus this week, right? So for you, Virgo, we've got tension between the house of vulnerability and intimate connections and, other people's resources and psychological kind of wounding and healing themes, squaring off with the 5th house of what brings you pleasure, what sparks joy for you, your creative projects and self-expression, children, and, your own children and children that you're associated with. So those two areas of life are in tension right now. And how you can resolve that tension is by acting in a way or making choices that are in integrity, that feel aligned, that feel self-empowering and self-respecting to you. And so, only you will know the specifics of what that is for you. But also have a listen, Virgo, to the intro for more context about this. Moving on to Libra. Libra, for you, it's the 7th and the 4th houses that are squaring off this week. So Venus and Eris and Lilith and Chiron are all in Aries, squaring Pluto and all the other energy in Capricorn, right? Specifically, Venus and Pluto are squaring off this week. So that is a square between, or some tension between, your close personal relationships and contractual obligations and home, family, place of living, your roots, real estate potentially, your emotional security needs. These two areas of life are in some tension. How do you resolve that tension? You act in self-respecting ways, in ways that feel in integrity, aligned with your soul's path, that feel empowering, self-empowering, right? Not power like I'm lording power over another person. Self-empowering is what I'm talking about here. So that's for you, Libra. Moving on to Scorpio. Scorpio, we've got the 6th and the 3rd houses squaring off for you right now, with all this energy in Aries, which is Venus and Eris conjuncting, and then Lilith and Chiron conjuncting at the earlier degrees of Aries, squaring off with all the energy in Capricorn, specifically Pluto in Capricorn squaring Venus this week, right? Venus and Aries. And so for you, Scorpio, this is tension between your daily grind, your daily routine, your health and wellness, issues around that, issues around relationships of unequals, employee, employer, subordinates, that kind of thing. Issues around pets potentially as well. Squaring off with your 3rd house of your immediate environment, short commutes, communications, all things communications. People in your immediate environment, people like siblings and cousins and peers and neighbors and teammates, this sort of thing. There's some tension between those two areas of life for you. So how do you resolve this tension? Well, Scorpio, to resolve the tension, the best approach is acting in a way that feels self-empowering, self-respecting, self-loving, and it feels very aligned, right? In integrity and aligned with your soul's path. So that's for you, Scorpio. Moving to Sagittarius now. Sag, for you, what we've got is tension between your 5th house and your 2nd house. So Venus and Eris in Aries, Lilith and Chiron in Aries, all squaring off with the Capricorn energy, specifically Pluto and Capricorn squaring Venus in Aries. And so I spoke about all of what that means in the intro, so make sure you listen to that. But for you, Sagittarius, 5th house, children, creative self-expression, creative projects, what brings you pleasure, how you have fun, what sparks joy for you. Squaring off, it's in some tension with your personal resources, time, money, energy, with what you value, your core values and your self-worth, your sense of self-worth. Those two areas of the chart of your life are in tension right now. And so how can you relieve that tension? Well, take action, make your decisions in a way that feels self-respecting, self-loving, self-empowering, and aligned, and in integrity. So that's for you, Sagittarius. Moving on to Capricorn, the areas that are in tension for you, Capricorn, are the 4th and 1st houses. Venus and Eris, Lilith and Chiron are all in Aries in your 4th house, and then all of that energy in your 1st house, right, in Capricorn, including Pluto, who is squaring Venus this week. And so for you, that looks like tension between your home, your family, your place of living, your emotional security, your roots, your ancestry, squaring off with the self. Who am I? I, me, mine, my personal vitality, my physical body, my sense of how I project myself out into the world and how the world perceives me. These two areas are in tension right now. How can you resolve that tension? You can do things that feel self-empowering, self-respecting, self-loving. Make your decisions with those things in mind. Make decisions that feel in integrity and aligned with your soul's path. That's how you resolve the tension optimally, Capricorn. So we've got Aquarius and Pisces left. So Aquarius, for you, this tension is being felt, right? Venus and Eris and Lilith and Chiron in Aries squaring off with all the Capricorn energy, including Pluto and Capricorn squaring Venus in Aries this week. So for you, that's the 3rd and the 12th houses. Your 3rd house speaks to your immediate environment and the people in your immediate environment. So siblings, cousins, peers, teammates, this kind of thing. All things communication. It can have to do with short commutes. I don't know if I said that or not. Squaring off with what's going on behind closed doors for you. in terms of your spirituality, your dreams, your subconscious, your how you spend time, in rest, recovery, reflection, solitude, this kind of thing, right? And places behind closed doors as well, things like prisons and hospices and hospitals and spiritual retreat centers and rehabilitation facilities. So something going on between those two areas of life is in tension right now. And how you resolve that tension is by taking action in ways that feel aligned with your soul's path, that feel in integrity, that feel self-loving and self-respecting and self-empowering. So that's for you, Aquarius. Listen to the intro for all the context. And last but not least, we have Pisces. Pisces, for you, this tension in the chart is being felt in your 2nd and 11th houses. So the tension between Venus and Eris in Aries, and Lilith and Chiron in Aries, squaring off with all the Capricorn energy, right? Including specifically Pluto and Capricorn squaring Venus and Eris in Aries this week. So that tension is between the 2nd house of your personal resources, your self-worth, time, your personal time, money, and energy, what you value, squaring off with the group, friendship groups, clubs, associations, networking, and your hopes and dreams for the future, any sort of gains, right? The people that can help you get where you want to be. So these two areas of the chart are in tension. How do you resolve that tension, Pisces? Well, you act in ways that feel aligned with your soul's path, and that feel in integrity, and that feel self-loving and self-respecting and self-empowering. And being a Pisces, you trust the process, right? Pisces as well. So listen to the intro for the context, the bigger picture there. But I hope that that's been helpful to all of you. I'm interested to know how this is playing out for you and if you're feeling this tension and how you are choosing to resolve it. And I will see you next week when we're going to talk about the full moon in Virgo. All right, take good care. Bye for now.